Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next segment of the Visitor Readiness at Historic Sites, part of a year-long program with Delaware County Historic Preservation Network, Delaware County Planning Department, America 250, PA Delco. We're trying to get all of our sites ready for upcoming America 250 next year. So we're going to give a presentation about ADA at historic sites. This has been a long process, starting in 2018. Started working on trying to get all of our sites thinking about accessibility, and so uh, so we're having so I finished all of the audits at all the different sites. If I didn't get to you and you want to have me come out to do an audit, I'm more than happy to come out. Um, so we're going to be publishing the guide and the results of our study um, shortly, and but it'll look kind of like this with lots of pretty pictures and stuff like that. So anyway, the blur doesn't really help, but so anyway, I'm going to give a presentation about what you can find in the guidebook. This will be recorded, and everything will be posted on the Delaware County Planning Department and the Historic Preservation Network websites, and we'll be sharing all the information when it is finished. So, if you are not already, could you please mute yourself so that we have no distractions. Thank you very much. All right. So, as you can see, that this is the ADA at Historic Sites, how to make our buildings and our programs accessible for all. So Delaware County is home to over 30 historical sites that are open to the public. The ADA really only deals with ones that are open to the public and not houses, private homes. But all of the things that I'm recommending is relevant to any kind of historic building. And most of the sites are volunteer run, and they depend on visitors for sustaining the buildings, programs, and organizations. So it's really important that we are able to include as many people as we can to come visit our sites. The ADA was first published in 1990 and updated in 2010, but people, a lot of sites are still not accessible, even though this has been around for a while. So this project was created to assist all of the owners of the buildings, which may be municipalities, and organizations who manage these buildings, to make them more inclusive and ready to accept visitors. So the ADA is enforceable, and historic sites are not grandfathered in, so they do need to comply with the ADA as much as possible. And this means making reasonable accommodations for your site to accept disabled people. We are not saying that you need to put an elevator in every single site, but you do need to make reasonable accommodations. And there have been legal cases in which sites that are known to not be accessible have been sued. So we're trying to kind of preempt that and give you recommendations so that you can make these changes as much as you can. The historic sites are supposed to be open to all visitors, and that's for both mobility disabilities and non-mobility disabilities, and people without disabilities. If you don't accommodate people with disabilities, that kind of limits the number of people that can visit your site. And if they feel like they may not be welcome, then that may turn them off from attending any of your programs too. So we want people to feel welcome. And you may not know, but Delaware County has um, like 18% of the population is over 65, and a lot of people over 65 have limited mobility and other disabilities, and 48,000 people under 65 also have a disability. So there's a lot of people that this may affect. And also, like, if you make the building accessible to people with disabilities, it allows people with like young children and strollers, things like that as well. So it kind of makes everybody included. So I visited 27 historic sites to receive these accessibility audits. And as I said, if you are not one of these sites and you want me to come out, I'm happy to come out. So you can see like where all these sites were. Oops. And when I went on the sites, I filled out a checklist and I took photos, and I gave each of the sites the back of the paper checklist and a list of recommendations for them to work on. So the recommendations can be incorporated into future maintenance and upgrades. So it's like when you're replacing your handrail, replace it with something that's ADA compliant. If you are paving your parking lot, make sure you put your uh have them marked correctly with signs, like that kind of recommendations. And many of these suggestions are remedied with your existing resources. So many of them were like move the toilet roll holder to, an accessible location, and that was very easily done by people without having to spend any money or get any municipalities involved. So going to go through the guidelines from the 2010 ADA checklist. So the first important thing, you have to make sure that people are able to access your site and to arrive at your site and be able to park. And so like the ground needs to be level, needs to be like of a surface that you're not going to slip on. You need to have enough space around for cars and or vans. So places like Chadford Historical Society, it's all like a gravel lot, so there's no like site like restrictions of the size of the vehicles, but they have these signs for like these are permanent signs for reserved parking. If you don't have the capacity to put in permanent signs, there are temporary signs that you can put in as well. And those could be movable where you are.
Okay,
Sorry,
with
yeah.
the gravel, how would that work with a wheelchair?
Well, so you want to have your accessible site as close as possible to a paved surface. So like in this case, the little path that's next to the sign is a paved surface. And a lot of gravel is packed down hard, so it's not like really loose gravel. Um it's just like things like grass can get slippery if it's wet, and can be uneven. So if you can put in at least a gravel, or you can use like a geo grid to make, if you want to have grass, have like a geo grid that makes it like a level surface that grass can go through. It makes it permeable as well as accessible. Um, so yeah, so it's gravel in that it's not asphalt. And if you're like this site and like many sites, if you're near a creek, there may be um, other considerations such as permeability that you need to think about. So, um,
My
uh,
brother's in a wheelchair and gravel is fine for him. Sometimes it's the grass, it's the level of the grass. If there's bumps or there's ruts
yeah,
or like that is the issue.
yeah. So as long as the gravel is like packed, is not like deep, like like as long as it's kind of packed hard that you can push through, then that's usually fine. Yeah, you just don't want to have like thick grass that people have to wade through. Um, So if you do have grass, keep it mowed pretty short, and have like a, as I said, like a geogrid or something underneath to keep it level. Right. So going on to paths. The paths that are going to the buildings from the parking lot needs to be at least 36 inches wide. If you're gonna have like a passing area, that needs to be 60 inches wide, but generally 36 inches. And it needs to be at a reasonable slope, um, both uh, both like in the direction of travel and across the length of travel. So you don't want people to feel like they're tilting one way or another, or that they're struggling to go uphill. If there's more than a 1 to 20 slope, then it should be treated as a ramp and you need to add handrails to it. And there are ways that you can uh, um, adjust your path. So, for example, the Morton house in Norwood currently has this stone path, and you can see it's uneven and it's broken and it has grass growing through it. But at the top, like closer to the house, you can see that they're replacing it with fundraising bricks. So they're raising money to replace their path and make it a more level and accessible
Yeah,
path. Um,
yeah. Are
sorry,
you in the
George, can you mute
shower?
yourself? Or one second.
Uh,
Um,
and my
and
phone was in
if
the
you don't
bathroom.
want to do the fundraising brick,
My
you
phone from
can,
the back of the toilet.
sorry.
Jeff here, reach it for mom and throw it to me.
Okay, sorry. Um, so if you are able to get the materials, you can get like Eagle Scouts or other community groups to help lay your paths. That's a good Eagle Scout project. Um, and uh, but you have to provide the materials. And sometimes like these things can be donated as well. So like there are ways about doing this. Um, but you want to make sure that uh that it's wide and it's not slippery and it doesn't have large cracks that like grass can go through. So ramps, as I said, like anything, any slope greater than 1 to 20, this counts as a ramp. And so, um, uh, uh, it needs to have a handrail, preferably on both sides. You can see the Thornbury Historical Society only has it on one side because they have the building on the other. Um, and it has like a level access that goes to the accessible parking. And so the when you have ramps, you're going to have permanent ones, but we know that a lot of the buildings um, on the main entrance is like their most prominent feature, and you may not want to have uh, a ramp toward the front of the building. So if you have another entrance to the building, such as like on the back or the side, then you can use that for a ramp. Um, you just need to have like a sign at your main entrance telling people where the accessible entrance is. And it is also possible to have temporary ramps as long as they meet are 1 to 20, right? Because you don't want these things to be too steep. They should have handrails on the side of these temporary ramps as well. As you say, like, your alternative entrance can be on the rear or the side if you can't do it on the front. Because like a 1 to 20, that's like the maximum, but that's like to go up 1 foot, that goes out 20 feet. So if you don't have the space for that, you may have to do like some switchbacks. If all you need to get into the building is to adjust your threshold, you can do what the Grange did and just have like this is a relatively temporary portable threshold that kind of bridges that gap between like the level outside and the kitchen inside. So there are, uh, the Secretary of Interior Standards would recommend that you don't make as much like permanent changes or irreversible changes to your buildings, so that any alterations that you make could be taken out, removed at a later date when, um, in case you need to replace them, and it doesn't damage the historic fabric of the building. Inside your buildings, there needs to be a clear like circulation space around objects such as display cases, your like your researching tables, just down the hallway. You don't want to have things sticking out into the hallway that people who have visual difficulties would knock into. So you can see the man with the white cane, he can, be far enough away from the wall that he's not knocking into the stuff along the wall. And the places that you have for people to sit and do research, if you have that area in your building. I know everyone has a different site, so not everyone has research tables. But any place that you are encouraging people to sit and in your sites, whether it be like a desk or a table and chairs and stuff, should meet the height requirements that are in the guidelines. And movable chairs and tables is the most flexible way to have that. So if you have chairs and tables that can move around, and you can remove one of the chairs so a wheelchair can pull in, like that's the ideal. Restrooms. I visited so many restrooms, and measured and got really close with all of your lovely restrooms. So there's a lot of different things that are going on in the restrooms, and I know not everyone has the space in their buildings to have an accessible restroom. And so that's like recommend like as a more permanent solution to have like an outbuilding that you could have an accessible bathroom built into it, like a visitor center. But we know that's not feasible for a lot of people. So if you're having any kind of special event, then get a accessible porta potty to for everyone to use. And there's different things that you can do for all of your bathrooms. Like, so, again, like we know that a lot of this is in your long-term maintenance replacement plans. But if you're replacing your sink, replace it with something that is, compliant. And we know that like if you really don't have the ability to get a wheelchair into the bathroom, which we know is the case for many of the sites, because you're up or downstairs, or it's just like way too tight. There are other things that you need to think about besides wheelchairs in the bathrooms. So like the faucets need to be easy to turn. I had a little push-pull device that I use to measure um, the amount of pressure needed to open and close doors and open and close the faucets and push down the toilet handles. So all that needs to be considered because people may have trouble twisting with their hands, and that's not they not in a wheelchair, but they have trouble twisting with their hands. So like a lever type faucet is better than like the ones that look like an X. And if you have grab bars, like they should be appropriately placed. And I use this example, the Brandywine Summit Camp meeting recently got a whole new upgrade. So they have permanent guard handrails, but I just wanted to use this example as like it's not ideal, but if you really don't have the ability to put handrails into your bathrooms because of things on the walls, or it's not strong enough to handle a handrail, you can have one of these kind of portable handrails that are like reasonable alternatives. It's like at least you're trying to make it accessible. And we have as I said, like have the toilet paper dispenser at a reasonable location. Again, preferably not one that you could like knock over, but having it on the back of the toilet seat is uncomfortable for anyone who has back problems. So there's other types of disabilities that may not be as obvious as mobility or deafness or blindness. And so we tried to go into a couple of those things to give you examples of other things to think about. So autism and sensory disabilities is like is very prevalent now for whatever reasons, and so a lot of children especially need to have like a quiet time or to be able to understand what's going on with your museum a little bit differently than some other people. So I use like some examples. You can have like a visual vocabulary so that it's good for anybody to understand like what you're talking about if they are totally unfamiliar with what like a helicopter or a plane is, for example. But the same would be true if you had like I know George is the railroad museum, so like not everyone knows about railroads. And all those different things that, you might be very familiar with your historic terminology, but other visitors may not be. And so Brandywine River Museum has a whole sensory kit that they can give to the visitors, and there's like a little packet that says like gives them like step by step, like when you arrive, you're going to see this building and you're going to go into this room and you're going to see this. And so, so it gives them like, and this is available on their website. They have a whole page on their website for accessibility, so you can see all the different things that they're doing. And so it kind of gives people a a knowledge of what to expect when arriving at the building. And they have in the kit, they have headphones if they need it, if they need to not have so much noise. The Brandywine River Museum is a little bit noisier than most of the other sites, and I didn't do an audit there, but I'm using them as an example. For people who have low vision or blindness, having signs, especially on like bathrooms and stuff with the tactile, which is just the letters that bump out, or Braille. Not everyone who has low vision knows how to read Braille. They could have gradually become blind or have low vision over time. But just to have it at at a reasonable height that people would be expecting. Although, so I use the Middletown Township Historical Society is in the Roosevelt Community Center, which used to be an elementary school, and so they have platform lifts to get people between the different floors, and they have these bathrooms. But it is important to I did recommend that they remove the benches in front of the bathrooms because that is an obstacle that people might not expect. There's a lot of people that have so I group the dementia, Alzheimer's, and trauma together because the way that you can deal with that at your site is very similar. A lot of it has to do with memories. And the historical sites is all about memories. So you're trying to connect your visitors to their own personal memories, and it gives them a little bit better sense of what is going on, and it makes them more connected to the site and more willing to come back and visit. So I used a couple of examples here. The Museum of Modern Art in New York has they have a veterans program to deal with trauma, and they also have this project to make art accessible to people with dementia. So even though it's an art museum, and we're not all art museums, they like um uh like the recommendations that they give are still relevant. Uh, and another thing that you can do with people, with your visitors, or you can go out to like a local uh, like nursing home or care center. You can do oral histories and get people to talk about what it was like growing up in that town, or do they remember anything about your site and stuff. And so the Chichester Historical Society um, made a whole um, thing that's on the DCHPN website. And all you have to do is plug in your town for whatever the Upper Chichester Township uh, is. So, instead of remembering the construction of the B&O Railroad Bridge, you plug in like a different building or bridge or object for that kind of example. Um, People who are deaf, there's the people who are culturally deaf, like mostly people who are born deaf and may know American Sign Language, is slightly different culturally than people who gradually lost their hearing. And so that's like the lowercase d deaf, so that's why it has that d/deaf. So in those cases, it's much more important to have like more visual things. And for a lot of our sites, that's not a problem. Like the Concord Township Historical Society, we have like displays with everything labeled, and that's fine. Um, uh, if you if you want to provide like these materials in other formats, like people with low vision, you can provide things in Braille, or just large print, which is totally easy for anyone to do. Anything that you would be saying as a guide, you can say to people with low vision, or uh, you can print it out on a large format. If you're doing people who are hard of hearing, they can't hear you with the if you're like giving a tour, but you can have something printed that they can read. And for uh, like a larger example, the Smithsonian American Art Museum has these things on YouTube. They're gallery talks led by somebody who's using ASL to describe the paintings and stuff like that. So in the back of the book, the guidebook, I do have resources for how to contact like translators and other people who might be able to help with if you want to provide ASL for any of your videos. Or even have an ASL interpreter for your tours if you're having a big event. Offsite, like I was talking earlier to George about making websites accessible. Like really, like this is a lot of times the first step that people go to if they want to potentially visit your site. And so it's really important that your website is accessible, and you make note on your website how your site is accessible. So using the Brandywine River Museum, like they have a tab on their on how to visit. They have accessibilities, and so they talk about, like the museum is accessible, the houses may not be as accessible. We have like this kind of like you can have service animals, you can have we have these like autism kits, like that kind of thing that people would know to expect. And then you can also, off of their website, print out your own large print guides, but they have them available. They also have the sensory friendly programs. And then if you want to have somebody check over your website to make sure that it is accessible, there's a couple of companies that work with people who are disabled, and to get them to test your website, and they can give you feedback. So you can, you can say you can sign up to your business, or if you are disabled, you can become a tester and test other people's websites. And they do get paid for this, so it is a way of uh, giving disabled people some like some income that they might not otherwise be able to get if they're having these difficulties. Sorry. One of the things that I recommended to a lot of the sites is to create videos of their sites, especially the upper floors, if they are not physically accessible. So some of them have the ability to have people on the first floor. If you have like a temporary ramp or a permanent ramp or a like a threshold thing, then you can get people onto your first floor. But you may have upper floors that aren't accessible. And so if you have like a video or a virtual tour, you can have that playing in your accessible space or on your website. And so like Radnor Historical Society has all their videos from their programs posted on their website. So even if you can't make it to the library that is hosting their talks, like you can watch the videos later. So having virtual sessions such as like what we're doing now makes it like more accessible to everybody. So like you're in your own house and you don't have to physically make it out to the site. And there's also the virtual tours. And so we use Clio website and the app. You can sort out like you can have on your site like virtual tours or like audio tours. You can create like a driving tour of multiple sites, but also on your individual site, if you have a bunch of buildings or if you have like a room within that room, if you have like a bunch of things that you want to talk about, you can have that incorporated there. There's also some places like Matterport, or even if you know a realtor that does 360 pictures of houses, you can incorporate that into your website as well, and you can upload it and you can point out different objects, and you can have them pop up and you can talk about your objects. Sorry, keep skipping. Here's the other one. If you can't get people physically into your building, then you should figure out how to get your programming to them. And so a lot of times that's using portable exhibits. So if you have like a little portable display case that you can put some of your objects in, or like the Brick Store Museum, they have at a bunch of different places around the city in Maine, they have some of their objects on display so that everyone, like even if they can't make it out to the museum, can go and see the objects, and maybe that can inspire them to be like, oh, I want to see more, and then they could go visit the site, or they can go visit the other objects in different buildings. So it kind of makes it more accessible to everybody, and it also saves you some space in your building.
Kate, I think this idea of the outdoor display like Newtown Historical has is a wonderful idea for sites that have limited hours and visiting days. The people that make an effort to get to your site and then only to find it closed, could at least take away that, and then you have the little box there with your brochure or whatever. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. And you can see they have a QR code that goes to the website, and they can like, especially if you have like videos and other things on your website, you can find out more. So the Newtown Historical Society has access to trails that are along the creek there as well. So you might get people who are um like if you're, at uh the Swedish cabin, and you're along the Darby Creek Trail, you get people who are accessing the trail and they want to learn more about this building that they pass by all the time, and it's a way of doing that. So yeah, that's great to have information at an accessible location. This is like right at their parking lot, at the entrance to the path to the building. So I'm going to go over the different the results of the audits that I gave. So I had a little checklist, a little kit for the checklist. Um, in addition to the paper checklist that had all the guidelines printed out. Brought a measuring tape because that's important to measure the widths of things, like doorways and pathways and things like that. Had a push-pull door pressure gauge, which measured the amount of force needed to open and close doors and faucets. And then I had a digital angle measurer, and I initially had it was more or less like a ruler that bent at different angles. But I found that the Bubble Level, Spirit Level phone app was much easier to use. Um, and uh, and it was so much easier to use and to read, that I recommend that for anything. And you can measure all different angles. You just got to make sure your phone um is level. So for the exteriors, so going through all the paths and the ways of getting into the building, generally pretty good, but we are not great in the amount of accessible parking signs. Only 4 out of 27 sites had any kind of accessible parking sign, and as I said, like, you can get temporary ones that are on like weighted bases. They're not too expensive if you can't put a permanent pole in. Um, the ramp slopes were not great. They, as I said, it should be at most 1 to 20, preferably 1 to 12, uh, and um, or less. But a lot of them were too steep. Um, and then the handrails, like there's multiple, like this kind of combining like a whole bunch of things with the handrails, but um a lot of historic sites have like a 1x3 or 1x4 like piece of wood on the top um of the railing, and but that's hard for anyone to grip and get like a good grip on. And so though it looks like rustic, it might look historic, it's not the best for anybody. And so recommend, like, if you do have that, to put in either like one of those, like, you can get these at a lot of stores, but like the round um handrails, and attach it to the inside of your walkway, like of the side of your uh uh the side of your ramp. Or you can replace it. There's a lot of metal railings that are compliant. I had one at um the Brenton 1704 house. They don't have any ramps, but they had handrails that met the criteria, and it's cast iron, but it looks historic. Um, so it's like those kind of things. It might be a little bit more expensive, but it's a little bit more of a permanent fix, but it would make a big difference. Um, uh, so generally pretty good. The hardware on the on the doors was kind of mixed. I Again, like so similar to faucets, like the twisting is a little bit difficult for people. So knobs is less recommended than a lever type, that you can just like push down without twisting. Um, uh, but for the most part, a lot of the sites, they're like, well, when we have an open house, like when people are visiting, the doors are open. So people aren't really using the hardware that much. But you also have to think about your volunteers and staff, and they may have some issues too. And especially the locks, like a lot, like all the locks, you had to twist. So that's just something to think about. So but hardware is one of the things that makes your if you have original hardware, I'm not saying replace your hardware. Just have the doors open, and make accommodations. Um, so next, there we go. On the interiors, a lot of them, um, were just one room, so like the interior doors didn't really matter. And a lot of them had multiple floors, so in those cases, like uh you didn't have uh you don't have all the spaces available on a single route. Um, so the accessible entrance like says like 19, which sounds really good, but that's like if you were to put a ramp in, is everything else accessible? So like I was kind of going off the assumption that we could figure out some way of getting at least a temporary ramp to your building. Uh, and in which case, then could people walk around, or roll around or, get through your building. So, um, uh, so figuring like if everything else is the same. And some people who have walkers are able to go up some stairs, although it's very difficult. So it's like, so ramps are ideal. Like only one had elevators, and that's fine. I'm not recommending that everyone puts in elevators. That was the Roosevelt School that already came with like the little platform lifts, because it was a public school. Um, and I'm not recommending that you drastically change the interior and, make the door widths wider. Um, but if you have things in a room that it doesn't meet that with, then be prepared to bring things out into an area that is accessible. Um, Light switches is one of those things that, they didn't have electricity when the majority of these buildings were constructed. And so these things were retrofitted afterwards. And they were done way before the ADA was a thing. So they weren't thinking about that at all. One house had it on the baseboard, and I was like, well, that doesn't help anybody. But they're trying to blend it into the historic fabric and make it not stand out. So, um, got to get like a stick or something that you can do to make that work if you can't bend over. But light switches are one of those things that generally like the public wouldn't be turning them on except for inside the bathrooms. Um, so like they should be in an accessible location for your volunteers and staff, um, but mostly like be thinking about it for the restrooms and making sure that they're at a correct height, especially if the room is otherwise wheelchair accessible. But generally are pretty good. If you have any signs, uh like only the Roosevelt School had tactile and braille signs. Um but you kind of if you have any displays of anything, at the very least, like pretty much everybody had contrasting colors. So there was like black letters on white background or white letters on a blue or black background, and that contrast is fine. Um, So at the very least, have contrasting colors for your signs, for your rooms and for your displays, and have that correct. If you know, uh, I'm not saying that everyone has to have Braille signs everywhere because it's not always feasible, but just something to think about if it is one of the things that you could do in your site. Um, so for restrooms, there were a few that were just totally not wheelchair accessible, and that's based on, being on a different floor or anything like that. So I mainly took into consideration all the other things such as like the faucets and the toilet holders, toilet roll holders. So uh so several sites like didn't have any bathrooms at all. And so in a lot of these cases, I'm just like have portable, like have a porta potty if you're having a lot of people over for one of your events. Um, the the door hardware was another things that people like maybe getting into the house or the site, like the doors could be wide open and the general public wouldn't be using the hardware, but in the bathrooms people need to use the hardware. But in those cases you may be able to be a bit more flexible in replacing your hardware, rather than on like the front of your building, like an interior bathroom may be acceptable to replace your hardware with a lever type that looks relatively historic. Um, Even the thumb latch ones are like, it's, is pretty accessible. And on the other side, it's usually like a little lever that lifts up. So a lot of the historic hardware is more accessible than the modern stuff that you can get. Um, so, uh, we're pretty okay, but not fantastic in terms of our bathrooms. Um, Other things to think about. People who have hearing difficulties, they may need you want to have your fire alarms have lights flashing as well as the sound. Most people or most of these sites only um, had smoke detectors. And we figured that like if you have people in your building and the smoke alarm goes off and there's a fire, that you as volunteers and staff would go and collect all of your visitors, even if they can't hear that, and escort them out of the building. But a lot of the places that had the light and sound with the fire alarms, uh, were municipally owned, and it was like a requirement, like for the like township insurance that they had these, special fire alarms and lights and stuff like that. So, um, it's not uh, it's not something that so that's something you may have to think about with like with your insurance as well. Whether you need to have that. Um, the only like one site had water fountains and nobody had payphones, so I didn't really go into that with a lot of places. Um, for the video, only two like had videos that played for people at an accessible location, but one had one planned. So that's something that you know you can do yourself, or maybe you can get like a school or college to help you out with like with the like media um students that are there, and have just go around and have one of you like give a tour, and then you can play that video at an accessible location or post it on your website.
Our visitors love to mock our video screen and say, "Oh, the Swedes had television."
Yes. Yeah, and you can like hide it in a closet, and then bring it out uh when you need to. Or you just be like, well, they didn't have electricity back then, but we'd all be sitting in the dark in a smoky room if we didn't have electricity. So, um, uh, there are things that people expect when they go to historic sites, and uh, but there's things to think about. Um, and when I went around, I calculate like how many needed a permanent or a temporary ramp, especially for events. So you may, like, depending on the space you have, you may not be able to realistically put in a permanent ramp on your building based on your site restrictions or your building restrictions and things like that. But if you at least have a temporary ramp, especially one with handrails, then that would be something to think about, and been trying um uh to figure out how we can, help provide that for a lot of the sites, or there's grants available for a lot of this stuff as well. And so the last part of the booklet is the resources. So like everything that I talked about is on different like websites, and you really like you're not alone. Like there's at least 30 sites like in Delaware County that are open to the public, and you're all different, but you all have similar problems. So maybe there's like something to, you can join together with other groups, and you can maybe like share resources or share thoughts. And that's what the DCHPN is about. Um, Read the recommendations that I gave to you after your audit, and work with your building owner if it's not you, or your board, to say like how you can implement these things. Um, like at Nider Hall, uh, I did the audit, and then I gave uh the recommendations um to the public works guy, and I was like, look, like just put in this relatively accessible restroom on the first floor, but the handrails are at the wrong part. Like they should be a little bit higher. And like a week later, he moved the handrails to the correct height. So it's like that kind of thing is usually pretty easy to do by somebody who knows what they're doing. So talk with your if your site is owned by your township, talk with your public works and your like anyone else to see, maybe they have people that can help you with that. You can apply for grants. We can always help with that at the planning department. And if you are thinking of doing like any changes to your site, just like think about like how to make it more accessible. Just like always have that in the back of your mind. Invite people who may have disabilities and get their feedback, and you can go to your local nursing home and say like, hey, can you visit my site and let me know, like, do you have trouble getting to it? Do you have trouble getting in, walking around, understanding anything? So like that's the kind of feedback that you can get, make changes. And if you ever want me to come out and do an audit or revisit your site, especially like after you've made some changes, then let me know. We're here to help. So that is it. So does anyone have any questions? Yes,
I
Karen?
have a question now pertaining to this. Are they doing the reading of the Declaration on the 7th at the courthouse?
Yes, but outside.
Outside at what time? 1 o'clock?
I think. I don't know. Talk to Carol. I will not be there. So.
For the visitation of these sites, I mean, what time frame is it going to be? Is it 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, all year?
You mean the visit? What do you mean? For me to
Visit
visit your
any
site?
of the historic sites?
You mean like if they're open to the public?
Yes.
Um, Well, we would love to have all the sites open, uh, like sometimes like 100 days a year is what's required for a lot of grants. But a lot of sites, if you are a historic site that, advertises that you have tours, then you are a historic site open to the public. So this is not for like your own personal house. But places like uh, you know, I mean like the New and Grist is open like 365, but that's like the whole
Yeah.
building. The uh um so we're not anticipating like everyone is open 9 to 5, like Monday through Friday and weekends, like but a lot of places are only open by appointment. Um So if you are only open by appointment, or if you have regular hours, then if you post it on your website, or if you don't have a website on a Facebook page, then that, also helps it be more accessible. Like George said, like if you arrive at a site and it's like, oh, it's closed, then like the information that's on your website is incorrect, or if you don't have anything on your website about when you're open, then you can't really have anybody visiting you. So you want to have and make sure like if you have a site, you should have a Google site on, people on Google. If you click on your building, there should be a little pop-up that says what your hours are. And you can put what you're um like when you are normally open, and you can have links to your website. So that's something that you can do, and it is free. So
Yeah, I'm just sitting in for Sue on this meeting, so yeah, she's away. So
oh, okay, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I know a lot of places are more open in the summers, like on weekends, for a couple of hours and stuff like that. So um but if you are a place and you expect visitors, then like all this is relevant too.
I want to get my 2026 plug in here. Ken Burns sent a camera crew to the Swedish cabin and is going to include footage, I think, in the first show of his series that he's producing for PBS on the American Revolution.
Oh, it's great.
Because they had forgotten to include people who were here before the English. And so we were an afterthought, but at least we got on.
Yeah. Well, make sure you share that with everybody once it's anybody else have any questions or comments, anything?
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Kate.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, thank you all very much for
Great. Thank you very
coming,
much, Kate.
and thanks. And I'll share the recording link, and when it's published, we'll print out some paper versions of it for you all, but it'll also be available on the websites, and you can download them.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all very
Thank you,
much.
Kate. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.